there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. You must hear today's interview with Clare Lopez. Clare Lopez was a 20-year veteran of the CIA, a special operations officer, and a member of the Citizens Commission on Benghazi. She will be here in 8 minutes with explosive information that should result in the indictment and arrest and imprisonment of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and a long list of other criminals in Washington. Later in the program, Montana gun rights advocate Gary Marbut will be here to tell us about an armed raid on a Montana company involved in manufacturing ammo. And you've got to hear that story also. A ferocious storm that started Sunday in Oklahoma moved across the southern states on Monday. The violent storms and tornadoes ripped across 6 U.S. states, killed 35 people, and left a trail of destruction. Arkansas and Mississippi were the hardest hit states. Deaths were also reported in Alabama and Tennessee. Weather forecasters tonight are warning that the potential for severe violent weather will reach the southeast and mid-Atlantic states in the next 24 hours. 70 million Americans will be at risk from tornadoes, high winds, lightning strikes, hail, and flooding. In fact, right now here in Vero Beach, as I record the program, it is raining, and we are under a tornado watch right now. In Eastern Europe, new violence erupted today as thousands of ethnic Russian Ukrainians stormed government buildings in protest of the Nazi takeover of their country earlier this year, a Nazi takeover that was supported by Hillary Clinton and John McCain. Men armed with Kalashnikov assault rifles and grenade launchers seized control of a regional police headquarters in Lugansk. Over a dozen cities have fallen to the protesters. The U.S. ambassador to Kiev called them terrorists. The protesters said they are patriots who will not accept the new fascist government that came to power in a violent armed revolution with the support of the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry today called them thugs. He said U.S. intelligence taped conversations of intelligence operatives taking orders from Moscow. According to the dailybeast.com, Mr. Kerry made the comments in a closed-door meeting with the Trilateral Commission, that shadowy group founded by David Rockefeller to promote world government. 6 Canadian fighter jets left for Romania today to take part in NATO patrols over Eastern Europe. The aircraft left their base in Bagotville, near Quebec, in Quebec, and in Romania. The jets will be conducting training activities in support of NATO reassurance measures, according to Canadian Defense Minister Rob Nicholson. France, Britain, and Poland have also deployed fighter jets to Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia. 4 warplanes from Denmark are also en route to the region. Sounds like everybody's getting in place for World War III. Moscow has drafted its response to Western sanctions imposed this week. According to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, Ryabkov. He said that the Russian response will be revealed very soon. Now, Vladimir Putin today hinted that he may take a look at who is involved in Russian energy companies. That is a veiled threat that Western energy corporations, oil companies, may be booted out of any deals with Russian corporations. Also, there was another threat today that the U.S. sanctions against Russia may imperil U.S. astronauts on the International Space Station, which is shared with Russia. Now, disagreements with Kiev could potentially disrupt Gazprom's gas exports to Europe through pipelines transiting Ukraine, according to a spokesman for Gazprom. And that again is another huge development, because Russia could cut off the flow of natural gas to Europe. They don't have to wait for winter for maximum impact. It would cripple European industries and factories if Russia cut off the gas. Next month, mid-May, Vladimir Putin will be in Beijing. It is expected that he's going to sign a massive deal to sell natural gas to China. That natural gas could be from supplies currently going to Europe. And it is also believed that the deal will be denominated in Chinese yuan currency, not U.S. dollars. Now, also, yesterday, Mr. Ryabkov said that Russia would deliver a painful response to the U.S. very soon. North Korea is also threatening to do something big and unimaginable by April 30th. That's Wednesday. No idea what they're talking about. They just said that there would be this is a quote, something big and unimaginable for North Korea's enemies before April 30th. So if they carry through with their threat, we're in the countdown right now over the next 24 hours for possibly some major event to come out of North Korea. We're in a very dangerous time right now, and I want to encourage you right now to get as close to Jesus Christ as you can get. Repent of your sins, draw nigh to the Lord, and hide yourself in Christ. We are going into a time of war and chaos. I'm Rick Wiles. I'll be back in a minute with former CIA operative Clare Lopez with explosive accusations against the Obama administration regarding Benghazi.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the End Time Newscast.
This is Max McLean. For wonderful words of grace, listen to the Bible from Jeremiah 31. The Lord appeared to us, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with loving kindness. I will build you up again, and you will be rebuilt. Again you will take up your tambourines and go out to dance with the joyful. Hear the word of the Lord, O nations. He who scattered Israel will gather them and will watch over his flock like a shepherd. I will turn their mourning into gladness. I will give them comfort and joy instead of sorrow. And my people will be filled with my bounty, declares the Lord. From Jeremiah 31. Listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
Hear more at radiobible.org. That's radiobible.org.
This is True News, the antidote to CNN, MSNBC, and the New York Times. My name's Rick Wiles. Last week, London's Daily Mail published a bombshell report about the forgotten Obama scandal known as Benghazi. 4 brave American men were abandoned by the Obama administration and brutally murdered by Islamic savages. As Hillary Clinton exclaimed, "What does it matter?" Well, it matters a lot to the families of the slain Americans who are still waiting for answers from the government about how their loved ones were left to die. It also matters to every man and woman in the American Armed Forces who wants to know if he or she, too, will be abandoned by Barack Obama and never rescued. The London Daily Mail article reported that a Citizens Commission on Benghazi, composed of distinguished Americans who served in the U.S. military or in intelligence agencies, concluded that the Obama administration was complicit in arming al-Qaeda Islamic terrorists in Libya. Now, you would think such a report of this magnitude would have been front-page news across the USA. To my knowledge, Fox News is the only major national media outlet that covered the story. Newsmax.com, WND.com, True News, and other alternative online sites linked to the Daily Mail article. Why was there no coverage of the report? Media Matters, the far-left news propaganda outfit funded by George Soros, smeared the Citizens Commission as a bunch of birthers, conspiracy theorists, and anti-Muslim bigots. Well, who served on the commission? A number of the commission members have been guests on True News. Retired U.S. Navy SEAL Captain Larry Bailey, retired U.S. General Paul Vallely, retired General Thomas McInerney, retired U.S. Colonel and former Florida Congressman Alan West, retired Admiral James Lyons, former CIA officer Wayne Simmons, and retired CIA Special Operations Manager Clare Lopez. Clare Lopez is on the telephone to tell us more about the Citizen Commission's findings. She worked for the CIA for 20 years, including as a Special Operations Officer. Mrs. Lopez, welcome back to True News.
Well, thanks so much, Rick. I'm very glad to be with you.
Well, I was very disappointed that the Commission's report received hardly any attention in the United States. The only way I knew about it was what I read in the London newspaper. Did anybody besides Fox News cover this?
Well, I'll tell you, the Citizens Commission on Benghazi, which formed up, by the way, last year, 2013, under the leadership of Roger Aronoff, who's the editor of AIM, Accuracy in Media, indeed a media watchdog organization, held a press conference on the 22nd of April this year, 2014, and CNN actually sent a cameraman and producer to cover the event, the press conference, National Press Club, Washington, D.C., but then never ran a story on it. So hard to know how they made those decisions.
So CNN did not find this story newsworthy?
It would appear not, or that something else was more newsworthy. Hard to tell. As you say, it was other outlets, as you say, like WND, like Fox, of course, like Breitbart, and a few of the others that did cover it. And we're glad for that, as well as we appreciate the chance to speak to audiences on talk radio like yours.
The far-left Media Matters smeared the commission, the members, by calling them birthers, conspiracy theorists, anti-Muslim bigots. That's to be expected from the far left.
Well, I suppose so, but again, if they did not attend the news conference, I'm not completely sure where they got the information, but I will say this, for any who are interested, that our report, our interim report, that was released that day at the news conference is available at the website, www.aim.org.
Claire, when I look at the membership of the commission, I see, retired U.S. Navy SEAL captain, 2 retired generals, a retired U.S. colonel, former congressman, a retired admiral, and 2 former CIA officers. All of those people, including yourself, are worthy of being appointed to a presidential fact-finding commission. I mean, it just really infuriates me that the left, the Media Matters, would just slam a group of patriots like this commission and say, "Oh, don't pay attention to the report. They're all a bunch of nuts." But this is the way the Obama Nistas have worked since they've come to power. It's smear anybody who dares to question their operation.
Well, I'll tell you, we're trying to get the message out to any and all who will listen. In your lead up to this piece, you talked about the American people, the family of those who were killed in Benghazi. These are the people who deserve to know and want to know and will listen when we try to tell this story. So really that's the audience that we're trying to reach, and we know that they're listening.
All right. What did the commission look into, and what did you find?
Well, I think the most important finding that people need to understand is that Libya, Benghazi, September 2012, actually a year before, 2011, that is the time and that is the place where the United States government switched sides in the war on terror, or what used to be called the war on terror. And it is the place where the United States openly, actively supported Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood, jihadist organizations, to overthrow a sovereign government, the government of Libya under Muammar Gaddafi, no question a tyrant, a human rights abuser, but at the time, no national security threat to the United States, and indeed an ally with us in helping to keep Al-Qaeda suppressed, especially AQIM, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. We chose to help depose him in favor of empowering Al-Qaeda militias who were running that revolution under the political leadership of the Libyan Muslim Brotherhood.
If the Obama administration switched sides and openly supported Al-Qaeda, that's an impeachable offense. I can't think of something more grievous than the President of the United States or his administration aiding and arming the terrorists who killed American men on the battlefield.
And yet this is what happened. The militias that rebelled against Muammar Gaddafi, there were also tribal elements fighting against him, but the leadership, the fighting leadership of the rebellion were Al-Qaeda affiliates, Libyan Islamic Fighting Group affiliates, known jihadists, known to the United States, known to our allies, our respective intelligence services, going all the way back to time in Afghanistan during the war against the Soviets in the 1980s. These people were named and known. Leadership like Abdul Hakim Belhaj, leadership like Abu Sufyan bin Kumu, people known by name, Abu Qatala, known by name as jihadists. These were the leadership of the revolt. These were the people that the Department of State under Hillary Clinton sent Christopher Stevens to be the envoy to these Al-Qaeda-linked militias. They knew perfectly well who they were at the time, and they decided to support them anyway to overthrow Gaddafi.
Do you believe Hillary Clinton personally knew about this support?
Well, yes, definitely, and I think this is an important point to make, that we're not just talking about specifically the Obama White House. We're talking about the entire top leadership of the United States national security infrastructure. Yes, the White House, the National Security Council. We're talking about the intelligence community. We're talking about the Department of Defense. We're talking about the Department of State. All of them knew who these people were and decided to support them anyway. Facilitating, for instance, the provision of weapons, which came to Libya from Qatar primarily, and were permitted through the NATO blockade, which we were part of, in order to get those weapons to these rebels to overthrow Gaddafi. Yes, they all knew who these rebels were. Many of them were personal contacts of Christopher Stevens.
Clare, you served 20 years in the CIA. How could the upper echelon of the national security apparatus of the United States of America switch sides and support Al-Qaeda? How can this happen? I believe what you're saying, but what you're saying is so bizarre that it's like, is this a dream? What is this?
This is beyond me to understand. And you're right. The Citizens Commission is not the only ones. We are not the only ones who are talking about this. The New York Times has actually reported on this. CNN, Fox, major news media outlets have already reported on the fact that the United States and our NATO allies facilitated the delivery of weapons to known jihadists. It's public knowledge, and yet the problem is that nobody objected. Nobody stood up, the media or top levels of the U.S. government, and said, wait a minute, no, or Congress.
I watched how the media, slipped this into the public discussion, like, oh, by the way, we now support Al Qaeda, and on to the next story. And I was, I spent, several years here on the radio talking about the fact that we were backing Al Qaeda, and puzzled that this could be accepted as norm, and that nobody in Washington, no congressman, no senator of any stature or power was or anybody in the military was willing to stand up and say, stop, this is outrageous. This is betrayal of America's fighting men. Somebody has to answer for this crime. I am still puzzled, just dumbfounded that they got away with it.
We all are. We all are, and that is why the Citizens Commission was formed, to hold the media to account for not reporting on this, to hold the government to account, to hold Congress to account. Speaker Boehner, why have you not yet appointed a select committee with power of subpoena and power to place witnesses under oath? Let me mention one other thing quickly here, and that is that this entire civil war didn't even have to happen. One of the people who came to us after we formed and invited witnesses, whistleblowers, witnesses to come forward and talk to us, another retired Rear Admiral, Chuck Kubik, did come to us. And he was a Navy Seabee during his naval career, went into forming an engineer company after his retirement, and did business in construction all over the Middle East, including Libya, which is how he came to be closely involved in the events at the beginning of the revolt against Gaddafi. What happened is that as the NATO bombing just began at the late part of March 2011, the Gaddafi people reached out and made it known that they were willing to enter into a 72-hour period of truce, white flag of truce, to talk military to military about the possible abdication and exile of Muammar Gaddafi. Chuck Kubik was in a position to help put them, the Gaddafi people, in contact with AFRICOM, who then had responsibility for this conflict at the time. Africa Command, that is, was headquartered in Stuttgart, Germany, was headed by General Carter Ham. The contact was made. There was direct telephonic contact between AFRICOM and the Gaddafi people. The truce was discussed. Gaddafi offered a symbol, a gesture of good faith. He actually pulled back his forces from a couple of cities. He was besieging Benghazi and Misrata, and unfortunately it went no further. As we were told, as Admiral Kubik was told, high above the level of AFRICOM, the word came down, there will be no truce talks. We will not talk about a truce. There will be no discussions of Gaddafi giving up, abdicating, or going into exile. There will be a war, and so there was.
It appears that they wanted to kill Gaddafi.
Well, they apparently certainly wanted him out of office, and yes, his death was the ultimate outcome of that.
And it was horrific from what was reported, the way he was killed.
Well, there were videos. He was dragged out of hiding in a sewer drain pipe, along with others of his followers, and murdered apparently by a French member of NATO who came and administered the final shot, the final coup de grace. But the ultimate result is what we see now in Libya, and that is complete chaos. Yes, the people that we helped put in charge, the Muslim Brotherhood and the al-Qaeda militias, took over, People like Abdul Hakim Belhaj took command posts. He became the military commander of Tripoli. Jihadi. This is an Al-Qaeda affiliated jihadi, military commander of Tripoli. By the way, he headed a Libyan delegation to Syria to offer Libyan official support for the transfer of fighters and weapons from Libya to the Syrian Free Army. That was in late 2011. But now we see, of course, that there's complete chaos across the entire region. We've got Al-Qaeda taking over camps that used to be run, actually, even by Green Beret, special service troops. And by the way, that was an article by Eli Lake just about a week ago in which he dropped this little bombshell that not only were our people left to fight and die alone, but also there were troops, special forces, Green Beret troops on the ground near Tripoli in a camp that is now in the hands of Al-Qaeda. And those troops were never called upon. They were never mentioned. They were never talked about. And our people were left.
Any evidence that U.S. forces were ordered to stand down and not rescue the Americans?
Well, I think the most we can say for sure is not that a stand down order necessarily was given, but that a go order was never given. Because remember, when a crisis like this erupts, and it's always suddenly, of course, everyone who has rehearsed and trained, and they do for such events, springs into action without any further orders. They spring into action to get ready to deploy. The pilots, let's say at the Aviano Air Force Base in southern Italy, Sigonella, they would head for the airfield. Ground forces would head for their gear and get their kit together. And then they would be ready to go, completely ready to go, and they would wait for that order to go. Well, the order never came. And without that order, which could only come from the top because it was a cross-border order for Libya, except for the special forces outside of Tripoli, they were already in country, but nobody called on them either.
Any evidence?
Nobody could go without that order.
Is there any evidence that any high-level U.S. military commanders asked for permission to go?
Not that we know of. The best that we do know, of course, is about these truce talks that General Carter Ham requested permission to enter into a white flag of truce talk scenario with Gaddafi, and that he was basically told no, there will not be any truce talks.
Do you know where the actor Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama, where was he at that night? What was he doing?
Well, to the best of our knowledge, and all we know is very little, that he had a pre-scheduled 5 p.m. Washington time, Eastern time, meeting with then Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta and with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey, both of whom had just been briefed by General Carter Ham, who just happened that night of September 11, 2012, to have been at the Pentagon. That's where he was that night. He received, the alarm first, passed it to these two, Dempsey and Panetta, who then went to their 5 o'clock meeting, advised the president. The next thing that we know of for sure is that the president engaged in a 10 p.m. Eastern time telephone call with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and that it was right after that phone call that the State Department issued its first press statement about the YouTube video being the cause of the attack on our mission.
And Fox News reported today that a White House aide, Rhodes, is connected to an email to Susan Rice, basically, linking the video to the violence. So that's a late-breaking story today. Was there any live, real-time video from drones or satellite images?
Well, again, what we know, and by the way, some of this knowledge that we do have comes not just from these wonderful investigative reporters, but also from some of the congressional investigation committees, as well as the State Department's specially selected Accountability Review Board. And the information, that they put out was so unsatisfactory that, that is one of the reasons the Citizens Commission on Benghazi formed. But as to your question about video or whatever, first of all, there was certainly CCTV. There was closed-circuit TV cameras in both locations in Benghazi, the ambassador's compound, which got hit first, and the CIA annex, which got hit second. Nobody that I know of knows how long those cameras functioned or whether they were knocked out and when they were knocked out. But in addition to that feed, there were all these, what we know must have been absolutely panicked telephone calls, cell phone calls, cables flooding into Washington, D.C., and all of the military commands, all of the intelligence community. And then finally, yes, drones. There were 2 drones. One went overhead, was diverted from covering Derna, Libya, and it was diverted about an hour or so after the attack began. And it stayed above post there for, I guess, as long as it had fuel to do so. And then was replaced by another one. But that feed, that video feed, has never been made public. I guess it's one of the most closely guarded secrets in Washington, D.C.
Well, certainly there were high-level people in national security inside the White House, the Pentagon, the intelligence agencies watching this video.
Yes, absolutely. That feed would have been live. It would have been coming into the Situation Room in the White House. It would have been flowing into the Pentagon. Very likely it would have been flowing into the State Department and intelligence community as well. There are people who watch this unfold on live feed video, but we haven't heard from them.
Would there not have been a flurry of intense communications from intelligence agencies, national security offices, to the White House, to the Defense Department, saying,
absolutely,
we're standing by, waiting for orders to go rescue these Americans?
Yes, there most certainly would have been. Those phone conversations also are locked, under seal, never to see the light of day. There absolutely was a flurry of phone calls of. Again, as I said, cable traffic would have been flooding in from to many, many different places, and that, by the way, is. Let me excuse me. I'll just mention really quickly. Yes. These video feeds and these phone call conversations were among the many requests made by the lawyer on our Citizens Commission on Benghazi, John Clark, who has submitted many dozens of FOIA requests, that's Freedom of Information Act requests, to various agencies that include the White House, the State Department, the Defense Department, and the intelligence community, requesting precisely just such material. And of course, there's been no response.
Did the commission talk with the former U.S. federal prosecutor DeGeneva? He's representing.
No. I do know who you mean, Joe DeGeneva, but no. To the best of my knowledge, no.
Okay, because he said he had information regarding rocketry and how it was being moved through Benghazi. Anybody in Congress, the House or the Senate, contact the commission to say?
Many,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there are many wonderful members of Congress who are probably equally as upset, if not more than we are, about the failure of their own leadership, specifically Speaker Boehner, to call a select committee. As a matter of fact, I think the number is up to about 190 signatories now from the House of Representatives calling upon Speaker Boehner to name a select committee, but he refuses.
Mr. Boehner runs defense for the Obama administration. He's the best thing they got going there in Washington. This is, again, it's astounding. It's unbelievable that this scandal has happened, and even more outrageous is that there's been no outcry over the findings of this commission. Claire, if our listeners wanted to read the commission's report, is it available?
Yes, it certainly is. We certainly welcome everyone to go take a look at www.aim.org and look under the tab for the Citizens Commission. Our interim report is there, as well as a good deal of the media coverage that has occurred to date. Please, we welcome you to go look there.
All right. My guest, former CIA Special Operations Officer Clare Lopez. Again, the report is at aim.org. Thank you, Claire. Appreciate you being on True News.
Thanks, Rick, so much.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
God wants time alone with you. Are you willing to make the commitment to join Him? Dr. Stanley prays for and with believers in today's Moment with Charles Stanley.
Father, how grateful we are that your love for us is absolutely inexplainable, indescribable, and beyond our comprehension. How you could ever love us this way, but you do. Your grace, which we sing about, encompasses so much more than we could ever imagine. Your kindness toward us, your forgiveness, the gifts that you send our way, good health and strength, even the pain's good. The difficulties, the hardships, the trials, the struggles, they're all good because they make us so much more aware of how dependent we are upon you. We humble ourselves before you. And I pray today that every single person who hears this message would recognize that solitude is not just a decision we make. It is a commitment we make to position ourselves alone so that there's no one there but just the two of us, so you can love us the way you want to love us. Reveal what you want to reveal. And so equip us to love you in return, that love will be everlasting, eternal, and ever increasing. And for being that kind of a Father, we say, thank you, thank you, thank you, dear God. In Jesus' name, amen.
You're listening to True News, your alternative source for global news, analysis, and commentary. I'm Rick Wiles. The sight of federal snipers and heavily armed federal agents in a standoff with American militia members over the Bundy Ranch controversy in Nevada sent shivers down the spines of many Americans, especially law-abiding middle-class citizens who had seldom paid attention to the increasingly militaristic, adversarial, and confrontational style and attitude of the U.S. government. You know, things have reached a new low in the country when even the mainstream news channels feature news commentators, guests, and politicians debating whether the federal government is getting out of control by surrounding a rancher with snipers. That visual image of federal snipers aiming high-powered rifles at an elderly Nevada rancher and his sons and daughters looked like something you'd see in a dictatorship. And to top it off, we have Dirty Harry Reid's Terminator-like pledge that the feds will return to the Bundy Ranch to settle the score. Unfortunately, the Bundy Ranch standoff is not the only example of the U.S. government using militaristic tactics against American citizens. Few people outside of Montana know about a federal raid on a company that recycles brass for ammunition. Armed officers with weapons drawn locked up USA brass employees and confiscated their cell phones and accompanying computers. Mr. Gary Marbut, longtime president of the Montana Shooting Sports Association, is on the telephone to tell us what he knows about this case and why every citizen should be concerned. Gary, welcome to True News.
Oh, Rick, and greetings to your listeners.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Gary,
so let me give you a little history about this situation. USA Brass is, as you asserted, a recycling company in Bozeman, Montana, that buys fired and empty cartridge cases in bulk and cleans them up and repackages them in smaller quantities and resells into the marketplace. Nearly a year ago, OSHA came, perhaps from a complaint or perhaps just a standard site visit, and found that two of the employees there had lead levels in their blood that were just a little higher than the standard that's allowed. And so they cited USA Brass, and USA Brass, as a result of that, installed a whole lot of filtering equipment and air ventilation equipment, and did some employee training and changed some practices, and as a result, I am told, got a clean bill of health. But I'm also told that when OSHA showed up at USA Brass, they didn't get the respectful attention that they felt that they deserved. And so fast forward to about 3 weeks ago, FBI and the EPA came in, and I think, let me qualify one thing that you said. We don't know if they came in with guns drawn, but we know that there were lots of armed agents there, like maybe as many as 40. And they came in, herded all the employees into some kind of sequestered area, confiscated their cell phones, disconnected all of the video surveillance security equipment in the business so there'd be no video record of what they did. They confiscated all the laptops, all the external hard drives, and copied all the internal hard drives, including 10,000 people on the company's customer list, and then walked out the door with no explanation.
Gary, what was the crime the company was suspected of committing?
We don't know. I haven't seen a copy of the search warrant, and we'd like to see the search warrant. We'd like to see what judge signed it. We'd like to see what the probable cause is, and we'd like to see the affidavit in support of probable cause. And that's why I asked the U.S. Attorney for Montana to look into it, and when I didn't get a response from him, I asked the Montana Attorney General to look into it, to answer a whole lot of relevant questions that are left unanswered by the scant media coverage. The media, of course, here in Montana did as good a job as they could of covering it, but they just weren't offered much in the way of information. And so there's a long list of questions we'd like to have answered, including what about that search warrant? And the one that you asked, what kind of violent criminal enterprise did they think was going on there that warranted an armed raid?
Approximately how many agents were involved?
We don't know that. That's another question we'd like to have answered, but probably somewhere between a dozen federal agents and maybe 30 federal agents, plus the Bozeman Police Department and the Gallatin County Sheriff's Department.
That's more like an army.
Yes, it is.
For a company that has how many employees?
40.
40. So they brought basically one law enforcement officer for every employee.
Something like that.
And the company had never been ever accused of a crime,
as far as we know. And the people there were told, we're here just to make sure you're not doing anything wrong, which is just terrifying to assume that any business or maybe even any residents could be subject to that kind of armed federal raid just to check up and make sure that people aren't doing anything wrong.
That's the kind of stuff you get in a dictatorship.
Yeah. Then there's some technical questions that are very legitimate questions we're trying to get the answer to. For example, the standard is that if a person is stopped by a law enforcement officer and is not free to leave, they're considered to be under arrest. Arrest requires probable cause. So if those employees were held in a back room for hours, as we have been told, then what was the probable cause to arrest them, and will that stand scrutiny? If it doesn't stand scrutiny, then were the people who did it, are they subject to prosecution for illegal restraint or kidnapping?
Gary, I hate to say this, but I don't think the Constitution matters anymore.
Well, I think it is less relevant than we'd like it to be, but I think it's up to people like you and I and a lot of people on the streets, a lot of patriotic Americans, to see that it is enforced and attended to.
I mean,
that's why we've demanded that our Attorney General look into this. He doesn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it. But we built a fire under him, and he's now, I've been told, looking into it, although I have yet to have a response from him admitting that that's what he's doing.
Is he Democrat or Republican?
He's a Republican.
And he won't look into this?
Well, I don't know if he will or he won't. I have not had any response from him saying that he is looking into it or he will look into it, but I have been told kind of third hand by others that that maybe he is looking into it.
Okay, going back to the original OSHA inspection, 2 employees, they found elevated levels of lead in their blood.
Correct.
Right. How did OSHA? How did OSHA?
Primers in ammunition contain lead stiphanate.
Okay.
And so there's a little bit of that on the brass when it's used, and some of that apparently got into the air in the process of tumbling and cleaning the brass.
But OSHA is assuming that the employees did not have elevated lead before they went to work there, because maybe the employees have lead fillings in their teeth. I mean, how does OSHA know these things?
I'm not privy to that information.
I mean, there's a lot of people with elevated lead in their bloodstream, and that's why they go to doctors to have it removed through chelation and other processes, because they're trying to get the heavy metals out of their blood. So, I mean, again, OSHA's just decided, well, it had to come from this employment. And maybe it did. I'm just saying OSHA doesn't have, it sounds to me like they didn't ask any other questions. They just automatically found the company guilty, and the company had to spend a lot of money to satisfy them. But then you also said that during the initial OSHA visit, that apparently the company managers and executives and employees
were not sufficiently deferential.
Which means they didn't shake and quiver in their boots and cower in a corner and act like they were little mice in the presence of the all-seeing, almighty federal agents.
Right, and apparently I have heard it said by people who know more about this situation than I do, that the reason for the EPA and FBI raid was simply to teach these people a lesson about federal power.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not in a position to corroborate that. I don't know that that's true, but...
Well, that's what Harry Reid said about Nevada.
Yeah, right.
He said, we can't let this go. He said, they challenged us. We got to go back and deal with this.
Mm-hmm. That's the way they operate.
Well, you know, last year there was a small mining company in Alaska that got a federal raid. I forget how many agencies were involved. The FBI, EPA, a long list of federal agencies raided a small mining company. Again, heavily armed, no explanation why they were there, and this is going on all over the country.
It is.
Another company was the California company that has millions of electronic files of medical records of American citizens. They got raided by the IRS, and the IRS took all of the medical records. Why would the IRS want millions of medical records? The company wasn't accused of tax evasion.
George Orwell could tell you.
Yeah, right. This is you don't have to be too smart to figure out what's going on. So how?
Well, and I've told our Attorney General that people in America are getting less and less tolerant of this stuff, and that the reason we want his intervention here is not really so much that he can do anything about this particular situation, but that if there were any policies or laws that were violated and he enforces the laws and policies, then that may well prevent bloodshed in the next such situation that happens in Montana.
Mm-hmm. Gary, I've been on record since 2008 stating that Barack Obama will do everything possible to start a civil war in this country. I think he's a very dangerous man. And God forbid this ever happens. And the American people have shown amazing restraint in the face of relentless federal agitation to provoke some type of of response from the American people. We've had the TSA molesting people in the airports. We've got the Bundy Ranch standoff. Last fall it was the humiliation of World War II veterans. Not letting them into the memorial in Washington, D.C., was closing the parks and treating people like they were criminals. I mean, it's just an endless list. It seems to me, Gary, that somebody in Washington is deliberately trying to provoke and anger the American public.
Right, and our Attorney General was frankly offended. He and I have been friends in the past. I hope we can stay friends after this. But he was offended that after I didn't get any response from my first nice request that he look into this, he was offended at the strident nature of my second request that he look into this. And I've talked with his employees about it, and I've told them, look, my chief concern is avoiding bloodshed. And if I lose friendships over that, I don't care. That's much less important than that we do everything we can to avoid some kind of active shooting situation.
What's the attitude of your members?
They feel pretty much like I do.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the feds are pushing you up against the wall?
Well, I haven't seen that personally, but I read the same reports that you do about all of the things you just mentioned, and I know that there's been a huge ramp-up in militarization of federal agencies, and frankly, I think that's reason for concern.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the issue of the attitude of those people who are running those federal agencies who believe that they are the masters, and their job is to keep all the serfs in line, and that concerns me.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of the Bundy standoff, do you expect the feds to go back and try to start this over?
I have no information that would give me any kind of viable prediction about that. I just don't know. I think I have a hard time imagining they're just going to give up on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no clue about when or how they might pursue it. As I understand it, one of the reasons they backed off was because information was developing that would have made any further pursuit of that very embarrassing to Harry Reid.
You mean like his son's involvement with the communist Chinese to get land in Nevada for the Chinese?
Right.
Yeah.
And so the reason the feds backed off, I hear, and it seems plausible to me, is because the word came down from Harry Reid that he didn't want to push it anymore for the moment because of that, to avoid that potential embarrassment.
Well, his boy's running the Bureau of Land Management.
Right.
35-year-old director. The only job he ever had was carrying water for Dirty Harry.
Right.
So Harry's fingerprints are all over that Nevada mess. Of course, that's his home state too.
Which is why he instructed them, I think, or so I hear, to back off, and they would pursue it from a different angle that doesn't have the political liability associated with it. That's
right, because they backed off hours after the news broke about the Chinese connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to not draw a connection between those two. Gary, going back to the USA Brass, is the company still in business?
Yes, it is. As I understand it, it's more difficult for them now because of the loss of their customer lists of 10,000 customers. So it makes it difficult for them to carry on. But they were told by the EPA that there's no problem, that they could continue doing what they were doing before.
When you say the loss, do you mean they don't have records of their customers anymore, or the fact that their customers now know the feds have a database that shows that they're buying the shells, the casings?
I don't have real hard information about that. I'm not totally clear about that, but I think it is both.
It's just raw intimidation.
Yes. That's why they send in, a whole bunch of armed people to do something like that, when really what it needed was a clerk with a clipboard and a pen.
Mm-hmm.
It was supposed to be theoretically some sort of audit. Well, you don't. If you send 20 or 30 armed personnel to do it, it's no longer an audit. As the Montana media reported, it's a raid.
Well, it's the new country we're living in, and it's quite frightening. Gary, what's your next step regarding this issue? If the Attorney General of Montana refuses to do anything, what are you going to do?
Well, the Attorney General of Montana apparently is doing something. The question is, will it be relevant? Will it be sufficient? Mm-hmm. I kind of expect him to come back with a very slim report saying, because this whole thing's under investigation, I can't comment on it. But everything that was done there was done according to policy. And for example, that would imply that because it is policy of these armed federales to herd people into a back room and hold them hostage for hours, that they should not be accused of illegal restraint under Montana statutes. I don't know if that'll be the outcome. That's kind of what I expect. So I'm keeping kind of close to me and not going public yet with what our plans are for the next step.
Okay.
But one thing I should mention your listeners may be interested in is we've had a bill before the legislature several times now that we call Sheriff's First, which would make it a crime, a state crime in Montana, for a federal officer to arrest, search, or seize without the advance written permission of the elected county sheriff. Okay, we've gotten it through the legislature before. The governor's vetoed it. We'll have it back next session. And the language of that bill is available at sheriffsfirst.net. If anybody out there in your audience is interested in trying to get something like that going in their state, just go to sheriffsfirst.net.
That's a good idea. And, to Cliven Bundy's credit, I saw an interview he did with Sean Hannity on Fox News, and Sean Hannity was doing everything he could to goad Mr. Bundy into making an inflammatory statement on television. Sean kept asking him, well, if the feds show up again, what are you going to do? Is there going to be a shoot-off? Is there going to be violence? I mean, that line of questioning. And Mr. Bundy was very, very calm, and he did not fall in that trap. But one response that he said was, Mr. Bundy said was, if the sheriff shows up, I'll surrender to the sheriff. And that showed that Mr. Bundy had proper respect for proper law enforcement in his county.
Right.
And he didn't say, no, if the sheriff shows up, I'm going to shoot him. No, he said, no, if the sheriff shows up with an arrest warrant, I will surrender to the sheriff. And this is the proper response of traditional constitutional Americans, that the sheriff is the law enforcement officer of the county.
Right, and the sheriff's job is to protect the people of the county as best he can from all threats. And that might be the thug on the street corner, and it might be the thug from Washington, D.C., but the sheriff's job, he's elected by the people of the county to protect them from threats that he can identify and interdict.
That's right. And preserving law and order also means stopping thugs who have a uniform and a badge, who are overstepping their authority. And right. So anyhow, listen, Gary, appreciate you coming on the program. My guest, Mr. Gary Marbut, he's the president of the Montana Shooting Sports Association. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate your efforts.
Okay, you're welcome.
A final notice to everybody who listens to True News on international shortwave. Tomorrow, Wednesday, April 30th, will be our last day broadcasting on several frequencies. Starting on Thursday, May 1st, our normal broadcasting frequencies, 12 hours a day, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Eastern Time will be 5850 and 7455. We will continue to broadcast the True News program 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on World Harvest Radio 5920. So make sure you switch your radio frequencies if you're using shortwave radio. Starting on Thursday, it will be 5850 and 7455. That's 12 hours a day, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Eastern Time, and 5920 at 9 p.m. for True News. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow.